And joining us on the broadcast is Giorgio Cefero. He's a professor at Georgetown University. He's also CEO at Gulf State Analytics. Mr. Giorgio, appreciate you joining us on the broadcast. First up, a very significant statement that's coming in from Marco Rubio, who says that United States would allow Iran to operate nuclear power plants but not enrich its own fuel. Your assessment of the statements coming in from the US?
Yeah, first of all, thank you for having me on your program. Always honored to be your guest. I think what we're seeing right here is the United States doing everything it can to use military force to basically push the Iranians into surrendering their right to enrich uranium. This is obviously what Trump's goal is right now. I don't think anything that Marco Rubio just said is too surprising, but let's keep in mind that as a consequence of the Israeli and now American aggression against Iran, the Iranian leadership, I think we can expect them to move ahead toward becoming a nuclear armed state. So this is really, in my opinion, the greatest irony of all of this is that for all the hype, all the exaggerations about Iran's nuclear threat, the way in which the U.S. has dealt with the situation is going to drive Iran towards having a nuclear bomb.
But Mr. Giorgio, differing statements coming in, convoluted in a sense, because on one hand, Donald Trump said that the nuclear sites have been completely obliterated, but the Pentagon says that these sites have been severely damaged. Your assessment, have the sites been obliterated or have they been damaged as of now?
My understanding is that these sites have been severely damaged, but not entirely obliterated. I also do think it's important to point out and remind all your viewers that Iran's nuclear program is not just simply these facilities. The Iranian nuclear program also is about thousands of Iranian nuclear scientists, and it's about knowledge that simply can't be bombed away. What has been damaged by the United States and Israel can, of course, be rebuilt. I think probably what we should maybe be concerned about is that we are now in a new era where it's just sort of increasingly normalized for the U.S. and Israel to bomb Iran. And there's going to maybe be a perception in Washington, at least among the hawks here in Washington, that there has to sort of be a mowing of the lawn foreign policy toward Iran, where every few months, every few years, the U.S. just bombs Iran's nuclear facilities to try to set the program back further and further with no real end game in mind.
Yes, so Mr. Giorgio, in continuation to that, Iran has warned of repercussion. There's going to be severe consequences is what Iran maintains. But there's not been any sort of a retaliation, any significant retaliation, so as to say. Do you see a calculated restraint on part of Iran, or do you see the groups backed by it, the Houthis or even the Hezbollah for that matter, getting activated in the region?
Yeah, great question. The ball is obviously in Tehran's court right now. The Iranian leadership will decide how to respond and also when to respond. The response might not necessarily come soon. I think Iran is going to have to very carefully weigh serious risks when deciding how to respond or how not to respond. Getting to your question about groups in the region that some people like to call the proxies of the Islamic Republic, when it comes to Lebanon's Hezbollah, I'm not sure what this group can do to make too much of a difference. Of course, as a consequence of the Lebanese organization's war with Israel last year in 2024, Hezbollah is much weaker today. When it comes to the Houthis in Yemen, I think that this group is now sort of vanguard of the axis of resistance, and the Houthi rebel movement in Yemen is probably Iran's most valuable ally in the Arab world at this point, and I certainly expect the Houthis to take some action at some point. But let's also keep in mind the Houthis, we should not look at them as an Iranian proxy. They have their own agency, They're going to make decisions about how to respond to recent developments on their own, definitely not taking orders from Tehran.
Also, Mr. Giorgio, if you can talk to us about what is the sentiment like back home in the US. We've seen the kind of dissent that is clearly brewing. How challenging is it going to be for Donald Trump to assuage the concerns back home over US getting involved in the war against Iran?
Well, in Trump's Make America Great Again MAGA base, there's quite a bit of opposition to neoconservative foreign policy strategies, neoconservative ideas. There is a lot of support from within his base for a more restrained foreign policy. We saw prominent members of this movement, whether we're talking about Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene or the very famous journalist Tucker Carlson, explaining that they're very opposed to the U.S. playing more of an overt role in the Israel-Iran war. And I think that this confrontation with Iran really stands to divide Trump's base rather significantly. Right. That being said, it will be important to see if these U.S. strikes on Iran were a one-off or if this is the beginning of a protracted military campaign against Iran.
Yes, Mr. Giorgio.
Okay.
Right. That's exactly the point I was coming to. If you can talk to us, what are the immediate challenges for the US at this stage in West Asia? Because let's not forget the kind number of troops that US has deployed, at least 40,000 of them in West Asia, and of course its bases in Middle East.
Yeah, well, in the lead up to these American strikes on Iran, there was a lot of discussion about Iran possibly retaliating against U.S. military bases in the Gulf Cooperation Council states. Certainly that's a concern that remains valid, but we should keep two things in mind is that, first of all, these strikes that just took place were not waged from any of those bases. And also, Iran has been spending the past few years improving its relationships with countries such as Saudi Arabia and the UAE, giving Tehran much incentive to not ruin the improved relationships with the Gulf Arab monarchies. So I think it's possible that the GCC states will not be targets of Iranian retaliation. That being said, there are also other countries in the region that Iran might see as facilitators or supporters of U.S. and Israeli aggression against Iran. So I would keep an eye out for what Tehran might do in relation to Syria and Jordan.
Yes, Mr. Giorgio, just last question before we let you go. What kind of response or assistance do you expect coming in from the allies of Iran, be it Russia or even China for that matter?
Well, I think Russia is going to support Iran, but with limits. I do not see Russia getting involved militarily, but I certainly could see Russia giving some support to the Iranian nuclear program. I think probably we could see Russia either officially or unofficially become supportive of Iran's move toward a nuclear weapon, obtaining a nuclear weapon. I think Russia will continue to put out very strong statements that condemn Washington and condemn Tel Aviv for their aggression against Iran. Maybe the Russians will provide Iran with some more weapons to help the Islamic Republic defend itself. But let's also keep in mind that Russia is very focused on the conflict in Ukraine, and also Russia has a relatively good relationship with Israel. And then thirdly, Russia and Iran have a very complicated relationship. So those three factors will probably lead to some serious limits on Moscow's support for Tehran right now. But as I said, I think there are going to be some forms of support that the Russians provide Iran. I'll add this as well. The Russian leadership has been upset with the Trump administration for not making more concessions on the Ukraine file. And I think Russia might try to leverage this confrontation between the U.S.-Israeli alliance and Iran in manners that can make the U.S. pay a price. So that will be important. It will be very important to see the Russia angle here.
Yes. Mr. Giorgio Kefero, we'll have to leave it at that. Appreciate you joining us on the broadcast.
Good to be with you. Thanks.